Jim Herd ran WCW like a guy trying to reboot Hamlet with sock puppets. He wasn't a booker, he was a brand manager with a pepperoni fetish. Dropped into wrestling from Pizza Hut's executive office, Herd thought gladiators, hunchbacks, and magical bells were what wrestling fans craved. Spoiler, they didn't. But Herd didn't just make bad creative calls, he actively hated anyone who pushed back. If you had legacy, brains, or backstage respect, Herd treated you like old cheese. He didn't book stars, he buried threats. These 5 poor souls caught the worst of Herd's corporate midlife crisis in tights. Lex Luger was Herd's golden ticket, a muscle-bound, all-American machine groomed to be WCW's next big thing after Flair. So far, so good. But Herd hated that Luger had an opinion and that he didn't blindly follow orders like a well-oiled wrestling drone. The real kicker, Herd's own wife, Stephanie Herd, not Luger's wife, was infamous backstage for pushing her own agenda. She clashed with wrestlers and management alike, stirring the pot and making Herd even more paranoid about losing control. This toxic cocktail led Herd to micromanage Luger into a stiff, awkward mess, and to push him into the main event before he was truly ready. Herd wanted Luger to be a corporate product, not a real star. Lex Luger was no dummy. When given decent booking and freedom, he was a legitimate draw. His size, athleticism, and charisma could fill arenas, especially with the right creative backing. But Herd's paranoia about his wife's backstage meddling and his own insecurity strangled Luger's momentum. Instead of molding him into WCW's new top dog, Herd boxed him in with terrible promos and forced him to play corporate gladiator. Fans wanted to cheer a wrestler, not a suits puppet. Luger had the tools to be great. Herd just didn't know how to use them. Herd acted like he was running a pizza chain, not a wrestling company, and treated Luger like a product launch that couldn't fail. Problem was, the product was a real dude, not dough on a conveyor belt. Sid Vicious was basically a walking, talking missile of muscles and bad moods, and Herd hated that Sid didn't play by his corporate rulebook. When Sid demanded a fair paycheck and some summers off, which sounds reasonable unless you're a Pizza Hut exec moonlighting as wrestling boss, Herd lowballed him like he was negotiating a yard sale. The tension got so thick Sid threatened to toss Herd out a window. Imagine a 6'9" guy telling a pizza guy, "I'm about to turn you into a calzone." Herd, not to be outdone, allegedly pulled a gun from his briefcase in response. Because nothing screams great boss like escalating a salary dispute into a gun show. Sid wasn't just a wrestler, he was a walking threat, and Herd's response was to escalate like a Bond villain with a grudge. No wonder Sid became public enemy number 1 in Herd's eyes. Sid Vicious was a rare combo of size, agility, and intensity, like a linebacker who could actually wrestle. When booked properly, he could fill arenas and deliver legit main events. Sid didn't demand the moon, he demanded respect and money he earned. Herd's refusal to meet him halfway was a business disaster disguised as ego. Sid's anger wasn't just temper, it was a reaction to being disrespected by a guy who didn't know the first thing about wrestling. If Herd had played it smart, Sid could have been WCW's monster heel to rival the WWF's top dogs. Instead, Herd chose to threaten gunplay over paychecks. Guess who lost? Herd thought flashing a pistol would fix everything. Because when your wrestler threatens to throw you out a window, the answer is obviously to escalate to full John Wick mode. Ricky Steamboat was the definition of a pro's pro. Technical wizard, ring psychologist, locker room's calm center. But Herd, who probably thought technical wrestling was a new spreadsheet function, couldn't figure out what to do with a guy who never smiled and didn't show up on his corporate focus groups. Herd wanted fireworks, gladiators, and flashy gimmicks, not someone who could steal a show with subtlety and finesse. So Herd decided to starve Steamboat of meaningful matches and good money, then boot him out like he was old inventory clogging the warehouse. Herd's idea of booking was treating Steamboat like a quiet accountant who wasn't brand friendly. Because nothing sells pizza like a spreadsheet that can do a moonsault, right? Steamboat wasn't just good, he was wrestling's secret sauce. His matches were the kind that made fans forget about the bad lighting and questionable commentary. While Herd was busy ordering gladiator costumes, Steamboat was selling out arenas and earning respect from everyone who cared about wrestling beyond the surface-level pyrotechnics. He elevated every opponent and made WCW look like it knew what it was doing, until Herd came along and flipped the whole thing on its head. Steamboat was the walking, grappling embodiment of why wrestling is an art, and Herd just didn't have the palate. Herd treated Steamboat like a silent accountant no one wanted to hear from. Meanwhile, Steamboat was writing checks in ring psychology that Herd's entire data-driven gimmick budget couldn't cash. Jim Herd didn't just hate the Midnight Express, he feared them. Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane were too smooth, too smart, and too goddamn over for Herd's brittle little ego to handle. These guys were stealing the show on a weekly basis, while Herd was busy pitching hunchbacks who can't be pinned. No, seriously, that was real. Google it. The Express didn't need costumes, clowns, or cartoon gimmicks. They just needed a ring, a mic, and a crowd that knew they were watching greatness. But Herd? He saw two guys outperforming his pet projects and panicked like a substitute teacher getting corrected by the smart kid in front of the class. Then there was Cornette, their mouthpiece, and the one guy in the building who told Herd to his face he didn't know jack about wrestling. And nothing bruises a corporate man's ego faster than a loud southerner in suspenders calling him a dumbass in front of his staff. So Herd retaliated the only way he knew how. Not by competing, but by cutting. He sabotaged their push, killed their screen time, and tried to erase their legacy. Why? Because the Express exposed him. They reminded everyone what real wrestling looked like. The Midnight Express was lightning in a bottle, one of the greatest tag teams in wrestling history. They elevated everyone they worked with and made the tag division a main event act. Bobby Eaton was a silent killer in the ring, smooth as butter with a mullet that screamed, "Don't underestimate me." Stan Lane had flash, footwork, and finesse, and together they were poetry with punches. Herd didn't just drop the ball, he launched it into the goddamn sun. Instead of building WCW around tag team excellence, he axed them to make room for cartoon bullfighters and aimless giants in leather jackets. Burying the Midnight Express was like firing your best surgeon because he made the other doctors look bad. Herd tried to replace the Midnight Express with a tag team of hunchbacks and circus rejects, because when you can't output greatness, just toss it in the bin and blame the lighting guy. Ric Flair was WCW, period, but to Jim Herd, he was just a high-cost liability with bad hair. And brother, Herd had plans. He wanted Flair to cut his hair, ditch the robes, drop the belt to whoever was bench pressing the most that month, and become a goddamn gladiator. That's not a joke. Herd pitched a gimmick where Flair would become Spartacus, complete with armor, short hair, and no personality. Flair told him to shove it, and Herd, who ran WCW like a guy managing a Chuck E. Cheese with no band, lost his mind. Herd didn't just want Flair gone, he wanted him humbled, cheapened, repackaged. Flair had creative control, massive fan support, and enough locker room loyalty to start a union. That made Herd itch like a polyester suit in August. When Flair refused to drop the title without proper payoff, Herd fired him, kept his $25,000 belt deposit, and sent the belt home with security like it was a damn toaster. Flair took the actual physical NWA World title and walked it right onto WWF TV in 1991, effectively pantsing WCW in front of the whole country. Herd buried a living legend and got buried by history in return. This wasn't a misstep, it was corporate suicide. Ric Flair wasn't just a wrestler, he was the company. He built WCW's brand through blood, brilliance, and bravado. Flair was printing money for them, and Herd tried to replace him with a cardboard cutout and a loincloth. Fans didn't just revolt, they left. Ratings sank, morale tanked. The locker room turned on management. And Flair? He went to Vince, got a rocket strapped to his back, and started his second prime on national TV, while Herd was left in a smoking crater of his own arrogance. Flair said it best. Herd didn't know wrestling, didn't respect it, and didn't belong in it. The man tried to turn filet mignon into a Lunchables tray because he couldn't understand the recipe. Jim Herd tried to turn Ric Flair into a gladiator named Spartacus. Flair turned Herd into the punchline of every WCW obituary ever written. He didn't come from wrestling. He came from warmed-over breadsticks and boardrooms. He showed up with a title and zero respect, thinking he could outbook people who'd been bleeding on the mat since he was selling pizza slices to teenagers. His game plan? Replace legends with gimmicks, threaten talent with weapons, and fire anyone who outshined him, which, unfortunately, was everyone. This wasn't leadership. It was sabotage in a necktie. He didn't bury bad workers. He buried greatness. Because greatness didn't listen to him. Greatness told him no. Greatness refused to wear a cape and gladiator boots just to stroke a middle manager's ego. So he fired them, mocked them, gutted their legacies, and nearly wrecked an entire company out of spite and fear. He didn't leave behind a legacy. He left a crater. He's not remembered as a visionary. He's remembered as the guy who tanked the ship and blamed the lifeboats for leaking. Wrestling's full of villains. Some wear face paint, some carry belts. But the worst ones? They carry clipboards and ruin everything they don't understand. If you made it this far, you know the drill. This wasn't a tribute, it was an autopsy. You want more real heat, more names they thought you forgot, and more receipts from the locker room floor? Hit subscribe, smash that like, and get ready for the next name on the chopping block. No rewrites, no forgiveness, just facts and flame. Thanks for watching.